Hello, my name is Michael Udow. I am a percussionist and composer, but I'm wearing my composition hat since I retired 14 years ago from the University of Michigan, where I taught percussion for 27 years. I was very pleased that my proposal to the Eyes on Longmont Video Club to record my opera Pau Casals was accepted, and the video excerpts you're about to hear and some preliminary information that I'll provide is a result of that video recording that took place in May of 2025. Probably most people who have heard of Pablo Casals knows him by his first name Pablo. But in reality, when he was born in Vendrell, Spain, which is in Catalonia, an hour and a half from Barcelona, his parents named him Pau, which means peace in Catalonian. And this has become central to his being, as not only was he an internationally famous cellist who toured all over the world, but he was a peace activist and humanitarian who supported the loyalists that were engaged in fighting Franco during the Second World War and after the war, because Franco, being a dictator, was aligned with Mussolini and Hitler. And so he was very adamant about supporting the Catalonian people and the people of Spain who were trying to overthrow Franco's regime. I was invited by Data Arts, an organization out of Valencia, Spain, to compose 10 works for a festival that they were going to host, celebrating the city of Liria, or that's pronounced Giria in Spain, who were designated a UNESCO City of Music. And in order to write the compositions, they invited me over on 3 different occasions to learn about Valencia province, the city of Giria, and the people, and also the history of the area, because that they thought would potentially impact on the compositions I would compose. And indeed it did. That festival happened 2 summers ago in Giria, Spain. On the second trip over, my wife and we flew into Barcelona, where we were picked up and driven back to Valencia. And on the way, about an hour outside of Barcelona, we stopped in El Vendrell, which is the birthplace of Pablo Casals, Pau. There's a wonderful museum that was created in his childhood home that's right on the Mediterranean. You walk out the door onto the beach of the Mediterranean Sea. The museum highlights not only his musical career, but his activism promoting world peace. In spending a few hours at this museum, I was so moved that I decided to write a vocal work for the Winnipeg Horizons vocal ensemble that was going to be at the festival, and it's called Pau, or Peace. Which actually coincided with this festival, which was a festival about peace. So that work was premiered there. But I was still so taken by his life story that I decided I would compose this opera. And it's called Pau Casals. As a retiree with somewhat limited resources, the idea of having this opera produced would fall on my shoulders. I decided that I would do a small orchestration, and it seemed appropriate that the orchestra would consist of violin, cello, and piano, because Casals toured and played many concerts with that instrumentation around the world. And then, rather than write a dramatic opera with a lot of tension like a Puccini or a Verdi would have, or Strauss, I thought it would be very nice to have it focus on two singers, Pau himself and his wife, Marta. And it was more about reminiscing Pau's career as they stroll along a beach near San Juan, Puerto Rico, where eventually the family moved. So the opera takes place with the two characters strolling along the beach, reminiscing about his career. They stop off at a cafe, they continue to stroll, they have another cappuccino or something, and the story of his life unfolds. So unlike most operas that are full of tension and dramatic angst, this opera is more reflective. In the grand tradition of opera, the work usually begins with an overture. And the idea of the overture is to assimilate examples from the overall scope of the opera that highlights what the audience will be experiencing in terms of, in traditional sense, drama. And so in this case, I've taken excerpts from the opera and taken the vocal parts, but assigned them to instruments, either the violin, the cello, or the piano, or combinations thereof. And it's a short amount of time that highlights what the opera is all about in music rather than in words. After the overture, it moves directly into the opera, which actually is not sequential. There are flashbacks. So the opera begins with Pau and Marta, his wife, strolling along the beach. And the first thing that he talks about, reminiscing with Marta, is in 1904, his first visit and performance at the White House when Theodore Roosevelt was president.
Accolades in the twilight of my life. It is prophetic that I am forever challenged to balance music's joy with war's anguish. I was invited by President Theodore Roosevelt to perform at the White House in 1904. That was 2 months before my Carnegie Hall debut, playing Richard Strauss's Don Quixote under the composer's baton. And 10 years before the outbreak of World War I, my life has been intertwined with deep passions for music and peace. I ponder how such a magnificent composer as Strauss aligned himself with the Third Reich. The joys of music, the anguish of war.
It's Marta who brings up his second visit to the White House, which was at the invitation of the Kennedys in 1961. And when he was there, he was performing for the Kennedys and invited guests. The invited guests included luminaries in music such as Eugene Ormandy, the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and composers Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Elliott Carter, and others. Then, of course, sadly, 2 years after that, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, and that deeply affected Casals, so much so that he was in seclusion, very depressed, for months upon months.
Self-imposed refusal to perform in allied countries that have tacitly supported Franco. After serious deliberation, I accepted the invitation to the White House, which included a 45-minute meeting with the President. I expressed my displeasure with the United States and its allies' neutrality during Spain's civil war, and urged him to withhold future aid to Franco's authoritarian regime. I was impressed with the right, but a president inherits policies he may not agree with. I am committed to worldwide freedom, but a president cannot always do what he would like to do.
Pau and Marta jump back. It's kind of a flashback of Pau's early life. And his father was also a musician. He was a church organist. He taught violin and cello and flute. And he would have Pau and his brother stand behind the piano where he couldn't see the notes, and he would have them identify the pitches. So in a sense, developing perfect pitch. However, his father, Carlos, never wanted him to become a professional musician. Carlos's main job, if you could call it a day job, was a carpenter. And he anticipated that Pau would follow in his footsteps. But at age 6, Pau heard a musician playing a broom handle with a string on it, plucking it and bowing it. And that was his first experience with a low string instrument. And he was so attracted to it that he had his father build one for him. And he would practice that instrument. It was kind of like a jug band string bass, if you will. And at age 11, his father purchased him a real cello for the first time. And then later on, his mother moved the children to Barcelona so that Pau could enroll in the municipal music school and take lessons at the conservatory. That was against Carlos's objection because he wanted Pau to be a carpenter. But Pau advanced quite rapidly, and on one of Carlos's visit by train to Barcelona, he purchased a real cello for Pau, and they were strolling along this famous street in Barcelona called Avenida Ramblas, and they stopped in some shops, and a few were music shops, and one of them had sheet music.
When I was 13, during one of his visits, Father purchased my first adult-sized cello. We strolled along the beautiful tree-lined neoclassic mansions on Avenida Ramblas. We passed the enormous monument of Columbus, with one hand raised, pointing to the Mediterranean, and the other grasping a parchment. Perhaps a eternal map for future voyages. With my new cello in hand, we rambled through narrow streets, visiting second-hand stores, rummaging for cello music. I spied a dark brown score with fancy black letters in one shop. 6 sonatas or suites for violin cello by Johann Sebastian Bach. I clutched the music just like Columbus grasped the parchment at the monument, and began studying the first prelude, which coincidentally seemed to coincide with our leisurely walk home.
Practice the sweets daily for 12 years before mustering the courage to play the sweets in public.
Yes, the feelings I experienced while working on these suites were among the purest and most intense of my artistic life. For me, Bach is like Shakespeare. He has known all and felt all. He is everything.
He practiced them for 12 years before he ever performed them in public. And this was a really moving experience for him. He found the suites very engaging and deeply emotional, and that became one of his lifelong performance works that he recorded a number of times. He advanced so rapidly at the municipal music school that he was playing professionally in theaters and in Barcelona and earning quite a nice salary doing so as a young musician. After his graduation, his mother, Doña Pilar, decided that the family should move to Madrid, where the King and Queen of Spain were residing. And that was King Alfonso the 12th. He was given an introduction to the Queen Regent by a famous Spanish composer who had heard Pau perform in Barcelona. As a result of that, he played an audition for the Queen Regent, who was so impressed that he gave Pau a recital audience for the Queen herself. And she was so impressed that she gave the family a monthly stipend that afforded them the opportunity to live right across the street from the palace. He would play duets with the Queen, Maria Theresa, who was a pianist, and they would play chamber music together. And she enjoyed that. And also, he was allowed to take studies with the future King Alfonso, who was a young child at that time. And they would do their studies together. The court wanted Pau to become a well-rounded human being, well-educated, not just a fine cellist.
Mother decided it was time for me to move to Madrid. The composer, Isaac Albeniz, who had heard
an introductory letter on my behalf, which I presented to the Queen Regent, a patron of music.
After listening to Pau's performance, the Count arranged for Pau to present a private recital at the royal palace that led to a recital for the Queen Regent, who granted Pau a monthly stipend, allowing his family to live in a modest garret just across the street from the palace.
Pau went back to Barcelona years later and formed the Casals Orchestra and took musicians and paid them a living wage, and they developed a music library and eventually a chorus, and it became quite a well-known orchestra in the Catalonian region. After 1929, the Nazis party was advancing. Hitler came into power in Germany and eventually Austria, and Mussolini in Italy, and Pau was quite distraught and did everything in his power because of the enormous fees that he was commanding as an artist. He was able to support people of Jewish heritage who were attempting to flee Germany and France through the Pyrenees, coming over the mountains to get to Spain to take boats to Latin America or the States. And so he worked tirelessly during that time to support that. And he met again with Kennedy after the war ended and implored JFK to put restrictions on Franco so that Franco's regime could be overthrown. And John F. Kennedy said, as much as he would like to do that, as president, he had to, in a sense, walk a tightrope because after the war, the communists were wanting to make advancements throughout Europe, as we know in history. And so Franco, being a dictator, was powerful enough to resist the communists from invading Spain. And so the Allied countries wanted to prop up this dictator. So Pau was so distraught over this that he refused to perform in any Western countries from then on. And indeed, this happened in the middle of a tour that he was on in England. And he canceled the rest of the dates of the tour, and that was the end of his professional performing career in public. He started the Casals Festival Orchestra in Puerto Rico, and he invited the finest musicians from the major professional orchestras in the United States: Boston Symphony, New York Philharmonic, Philadelphia Orchestra, Cleveland Orchestra, and they would assemble in the off-season of their symphony season and rehearse and perform with Casals conducting. It became so well known that in 1958, Dag Hammarskjöld, who was Secretary of the United Nations, invited Casals to come to the United Nations and speak about peace and the situation in Europe and to perform. And at at that event, Hammarskjöld had also invited Albert Schweitzer. So the two gentlemen spoke about the humanitarian and peace and rights of citizens from around the world. And at one point, after the assembly, Hammarskjöld said to Pau, why don't you just focus on performing? Because that's what you're such a specialist at and gifted artist. And Casals turned to Albert Schweitzer and said, well, why not do both? I can perform, but I can also be active in humanitarian causes. And that was the principle upon which he lived his life. Pau was invited by the Kennedys to perform at the White House in 1961. And at that time, he was also invited to the United Nations yet again, this time by Secretary General Utant, and to perform his oratorio El Pesebre with the Cleveland Orchestra Choir and the Casals Festival Orchestra. And at that performance, when it was finished, he spoke about human rights, and also he performed his solo cello work, which translates to The Birds. It's very famous, and he arranged it for string orchestra. At that special concert at the United Nations, Pau was awarded the United Nations Peace Prize. John F. Kennedy created the Medal of Freedom, which was the highest civilian honor for a citizen to receive. Pau was awarded that distinction in 1963, regrettably after JFK was assassinated. The medal was then presented to Pau by Lyndon Johnson. 10 years after Pau received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, he died in Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico. One of the interesting aspects of Pau for me was his pedagogical gifts. As I was a university teacher for the majority of my career, I was always interested in sussing out the most appropriate ways for students to advance their skills and not to be injured. And the tradition of string playing, whether it was violin or cello, in the years that Pau was a young student, was the teacher would have the student put a book under their arm so they couldn't move their arm freely, bowing like the cello, or violin like this instead of freer locomotion. So Pau advanced the technique and incorporated this more fluid motion, which provided much more expressiveness, and it was a much healthier way to play. So he really revolutionized cello technique and influenced the playing of all the string instruments as a result. One of the more attractive features of Bach's music to Pau was Bach's use of counterpoint. And basically, that goes back way in musical history, where Gregorian chant occurred. The monks would sing these chants, and it would be a melody. And then the melody, eventually known as plain song, was put in the bass, and it occurred there. But then over the top of that, another melody was written. And so those two together form this counterpoint, where this is going along, but then this above it would occur. And so it became two parts, if you will. There are numerous examples of the use of counterpoint in this opera. Most often when a singer is singing, the strings and piano have an accompaniment that is contrapuntal and supporting the harmonic motion of what the singer is discussing in the text. There's also a counterpoint in some of the instrumental interludes. The performance of this opera was rather unique in that it was an on-book recording. And what that means is that the singers have the music in front of them and they're reading the music as the maestro is conducting and the instrumentalists are playing, and they're using their music. Rather than a stage production that is being filmed live, and which basically is a documentation of a live performance. Fortunately, when I proposed the idea of recording this opera to the Eyes on Longmont Video Club, Bill Decker and Sal Martirano were keenly interested in it. And Bill took up the gauntlet of organizing the video recording. And the filming was done by both Bill and Steve Bigelow. Again, I was extremely fortunate in that I have worked with Kevin Harbison of Threshold Audio, who is also a professor at the University of Colorado and in charge of the recording services at the School of Music. And Kevin did the audio recording. One of the very tricky things about editing a project such as this that's done in sections rather than a complete run-through, and it was over 3 nights of recording, is that the audio and the video had to be edited section by section. The way that was accomplished was with the incredible ears of Kevin Harbison. So I decided what was the best take of any given section. And Kevin went about the task of assembling these various takes and splicing them together. But it's very tricky. We have to start a measure ahead and end a measure after, and then put these segments together. And after Kevin and I completed the final editing, then the entire audio had to be mixed with positioning the microphones in precise locations and the balancing of all the instruments. Then that finished audio was handed over to Bill Decker, who then, because he slated with a slate that makes a sound, was able to find all those various takes and putting the 6 cameras together into one video image, much like the the counterpoint where you'd have them stacked up, one on top of the other, Bill could select which video image would be most appropriate. And I got together with Bill at his home, and we looked at those images together and were able to make easy decisions about what cameras should be used. And sometimes there were very important contrapuntal parts being played by either Naomi Sue Smith or Charles Lee or Matthew Sebald, or all three of them. And so we were able to montage those images together. And that was very tricky, but a very enjoyable process working with Bill in that way.
The opera was filmed over a 3-night period, each 3 hours in length. The first 2 nights consisted of 3 one-hour sessions each. On the third night, the Longmont Senior Center sponsored a trip to watch the filming, where the entire 75-minute opera was performed and filmed. After the performance and the audience had left, an additional hour was spent refining certain parts from the previous night's sessions. In total, there were 144 takes, of which 51 were used. A total of 6 cameras were used in the filming of the recording sessions. The audio recording was done by Kevin Harbison of Threshold Audio. Kevin called out a take number before each take. The take numbers were recorded on the camera's audio tracks, as well as on the audio recording, so we could match up the correct audio take with the corresponding video take. The cameras were started and remained running for the entire 1-hour sessions, slating at the beginning of each hour. The slating is required so we can line up all 6 video cameras on the timeline of the editor. Here, you see the editor timeline, with all 6 cameras and their audio tracks lined up. You can see the slate mark on each of the audio tracks. Listen to the playback. You can hear Kevin call out the take number followed by the slate.
Here we go. If you slate, you want the numbers first?
This is take 62.
Running 6 cameras for 9 hours created about 470 gigabytes of data and about 132 files. The process of copying the files from all of the cameras onto the computer and lining up all of the camera's footage on the editor's timeline took about 8 hours for each night's filming. Here is an 8-minute sample of a recording session taken on day 2. This is only 8 minutes of the 9 hours of actual recording time. Here we see shots from all 6 cameras. These are the only choices the video editor will have when pulling this all together for the final production. The audio engineer, Kevin Harbison, is recording the audio while we capture the video. Kevin is calling out take numbers throughout this process, so we can know what audio takes goes with our video. Which camera shots would you choose? Here you see the camera 3 operator decide to move the camera over to the baritone, just before the soprano is starting to sing, leaving no camera on the soprano. This is a common mistake when the camera operators have little or no direction and have no knowledge of the music, trying to second guess what's going to happen next. The editor would probably choose to use camera 4, while camera 3 is being moved back to the soprano.
Consistently move the hand, sliding it up and down the fingerboard. By opening up the fingers, I could now play 4 notes without moving my hand. Everything flows and phrases can be sustained much more easily. It's really quite a simple thing.
We got to T, which is where we needed to get, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And, Matt, were you good on the, everything flows, the downward? The FAD?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think we can move onward.
Okay.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at 4 before T
Okay.
to where the quarter equals 60, which Elliot is around 664.
I see it. Okay, just a quick note, second bar of T. Some people have 2 plus 3, and other people have 3 plus 2. I am conducting 3 plus 2, okay? Here we go.
Kevin calls out the next take number.
65.
And actually, I'd like to say if the piano could be a little bit louder before T, 3 bars, okay?
And anyone want to check anything? No?
Let's go.
Okay.
How many bars before T?
4 bars.
Naomi, could you just check those?
Are you looking at?
That was to me where I heard it, but at the same
Yeah,
time, I think
but-
that's what's printed.
Yeah, that's what's printed, but could you change that to, darn, no, it should be a G.
Should it be an E natural?
Oh, sorry, G natural. That's my bad.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Same thing, please?
We can start 1 before T, actually.
1 bar before T. Here we go.
Again, Kevin calls out the next take number.
66.
1 bar before T.
Yes, this is one of my favorites. It is on the firm soil of our native land that we must place our feet to take flight to heaven. So when the
So we went further than
Right.
we were planning
But it
on.
was good, so.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. So we can move forward from there, Elliot.
Okay. Why don't we begin where it says, can we begin right on quarter equals 76? For me, that's 660, probably a couple bars off.
Well, sure, or if you even want to start on that measure before 78, I don't know how that is for the singers, but.
Sorry, was that an 8/8 bar that you were talking about?
It is an 8/8 bar.
Okay.
Is this a wine shot? Sorry, yeah, thanks for asking. Bill,
Are we good to begin? That's the
No.
question. Michael, we're good to begin?
Are we at the 8/8?
We're at the 8/8 bar.
76, okay.
Chord equals
That's like
76.
6/3
so this,
for-
Bill, this is the baritone, Andy?
Again, Kevin calls out the next take number.
Take 67.
And a little bit of,
Yes, this is one of my favorites. It is on the firm soil of our native land that we must place our feet to take flight to heaven.
I've been fortunate since retiring to Longmont that I've had the opportunity to work with very fine conductor Elliot Moore, who conducts the Longmont Symphony Orchestra and is conducting this opera. Also, the instrumentalists, who are terrific, were great pleasure to work with. I had worked with Naomi Sue Smith before in my other opera, A Wall of Two, and as concert master of the Lakewood Symphony Orchestra, she is a fine leader in chamber music and did a superb job, as did the cellist, Charles Lee, who is principal cellist of the Boulder Philharmonic and teaches at Metro State University. And the collaborative pianist, Matthew Sabel, who just completed his Doctor of Musical Arts degree at the University of Colorado, studying with Mitsumi Moteki, completed the ensemble. And Matthew was coaching the lyric baritone, Andrew Konopek, who is his first year in his studies at CU. Andrew came from a professional career singing with the San Diego Opera, but after 7 or 8 years, he decided he'd really like to focus on teaching and came to the University of Colorado to complete an advanced degree. Donna Ray Warren, who is the coloratura soprano, sang in my other opera, A Wall of Two, and has since moved to Cleveland. I so enjoyed working with her, as did our maestro, Elliot Moore, that we decided that it would be most appropriate and better for this particular opera, given the vocal range, that we bring in Donna Ray Warren for this production. And it was a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with both of them. Each of them helped me learn much more about writing for vocal music, which I deeply appreciated.
You know, Michael Udow has a way of writing, a style of writing, almost a use of harmony which is specific to him. And I think, you know, when I think of sort of the sound world of, let's say, somebody like Rossini, and how that's different than somebody, say, from, you know, Verdi. These are different sound worlds, and Michael has his own unique voice. And despite having different operas that he's composed, I think that he's able to have that unique voice, which is, you know, really his voice. And how he weaves that into these different libretti, in particular, of course, with this opera, Pau Casals, is just beautiful. It's a unique voice, which is very much his own style, and it's a beautiful style that I think we're all enjoying and that I think all listeners will be enjoying as well.
the way I would describe Michael's composition, that it's colors, I should say, controlled in kind of new ways, so that I often find as I'm practicing my cello part, it leads me to places that I didn't expect, which is great. And it offers new challenges too. I find myself going through like stages of denial, where if I don't immediately sound good playing this thing, I would first blame Michael, oh, how unreasonable he wrote this thing. But eventually I come around to realizing that it adds this color that that perhaps wasn't what I had in mind from the batch of things that I'm used to. And that's wonderful. So new colors, it's one of the joys of doing new music, colors you haven't seen before. And that's the delightful part. And my mind focuses on that part primarily at this stage.
But it was very interesting to work on Michael's score. His, as a percussionist, I feel he knew what works well with piano for the most part, and that was really helpful. Sometimes when a pianist is handed a new score, we have to look and go, well, is this actually doable? And basically everything Michael wrote which was awesome.
One of the great things that Michael was able to do was to really weave the libretto with the music. And he did that in multiple different ways. One of the ways, I think, is the choice of the ensemble. It's a very small ensemble. Really, it's a piano trio, and of course, Pablo Casals was a great cellist and had a wonderful piano trio that he played with so often. So to incorporate that right off the bat, I thought was a great choice by Michael. There are other things that he did, of course, with Pablo Casals, having really discovered the cello suites of Bach. There's many nods towards contrapuntal music and the music of Bach, and so I thought that how he weaved some of these elements that Pablo Casals really brought to the music world so effortlessly into his opera was really a stroke of genius.
You deal with notation when you're dealing with new compositions. Every composer does notation slightly differently. They mean slightly different things by how they write things. They use slurs differently. They use dynamics differently. Beethoven's forte is definitely not the same as Haydn's forte. And the way a performer has to quickly learn how to decipher this notation. And Michael's notation is very concise, and I complimented him yesterday's rehearsal, how it's not cluttered, not a lot of things in every bar. So it's very clear, but still it's a new composition, a new composer for me. There is a period of having to decipher what he means by the way he notates things. And throw in there limited rehearsal time and everything running very quick-paced and having to run very efficiently. It can be challenging that you don't misunderstand what he's talking about. And but he's been really available and responsive, so I feel more on top of it now. But at first there were a lot of questions.
Again, it was a real joy to work with Mike. I've worked with him in the past, and every time I play a composition of his, it is a unique and fulfilling experience. He knows what he's doing, and he does it with care and with passion. With care about serving the message, and with the passion of someone who really knows what they're doing and conveys that in the music in the most beautiful way. So thank you, Mike, for letting me be a part of this.
I was had a very equal partnership with each of the musicians. Of course, the singers are telling the story, but without the underlying music, it can be very difficult to even know what is going on. The music is always giving you a sense of the drama and the subtext, if you will. And actually, this brings up another point of how I maybe played differently or prepared differently when I was working with just the singers and our conductor Elliot Moore versus when we had the string players here. I certainly, besides playing some of the string parts to help the singers in those first few rehearsals, the way I played it was a little bit different. At the beginning, I had to think about maybe bringing out certain notes more to guide the singers. Michael's opera is very chromatic, and sometimes it's easy to lose the sense of pitch and tonality for the singer. And so when I was helping them prepare for this recording and before we met with the strings, I would often play things with a little bit more emphasis on certain notes versus when I started to play with, the string players, then I would think more as an ensemble and kind of layer things a little differently and have a more of a balance. And then also my role, I'm definitely changed at times, in before we met with the string players, I was often coaching the singers on, hey, if you listen to this note in the piano, or if you if you say the word this way, then the pitch center will be more accurate, or the word will be more intelligible. And then I did less and less of that as we started to move more towards recording.
When I first received brief description of the fact that it's based on Pablo Casals' life, I didn't know where the libretto comes from. I didn't know it was going to focus on any one specific event in his life. But now that I've had a few listens through it during the rehearsals, it seems great and amazing to me that, yes, it is about Pablo Casals. In fact, it's spoken in his voice, isn't it? It's him narrating about his own life. But it includes events, historic events, like Franco and Spain and JFK. It's almost like a moment in historic time seen through Casals' eyes while he's talking about his amazing cello career. As a cello player, he's a very well-known person in the cello world, and a lot of things that he's established artistically and as a pedagogue is still things that affects us, and we're very familiar with this stuff. I did learn a new thing that I didn't know before. It's when he's talking about, he seemed to be, talking some trash about old generation cellists using very rigid system of fingerings, and he kind of pats himself on the back about coming up with a more relaxed modern system. And I remember as we're playing it, that brought a smile to my face, because his system is not necessarily the most modern and relaxed from our vantage point anymore. But I'm glad that he was on board with innovation and making himself an innovator of new techniques and better way to save the body and play with greater dexterity. So apparently he was not that different than the rest of us. We're always looking for an age, trying to play this very difficult instrument.
I think the last thing that I would like to add is just that while we are all having such a great time, being together, what a privilege to make this for the very first time, a world premiere opera right here in Colorado. It's a great thing. It's great to have the composer working with us, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with those who are going to be there for the live recording session, as well as for, of course, anyone who's going to be watching this streaming on any device that you may have.